Welcome everyone. Nice to have you with us on this grey Sunday afternoon where we are. I'm in Lewisham, London, and it's grey. Don't know where you lot are, but hope it's better than here.
I can see the blue skies and white clouds in sunny Orpington. So we've had a great.
That's great. That's great. How's it in Leeds?
I'm in Huddersfield.
Huddersfield,
sorry. From Leeds, and I've got blue skies and sunny sun. It doesn't mean it's warm, it's just blue skies and sunny sun.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's various. We're in the UK, so we could have the 4 seasons in one.
That's it.
So yes, so we are here today to talk about a topic that is very close to our hearts. It's a very sensitive topic. At the ready, anybody needs one? So we've got them at the ready. I have it here every week, so it doesn't make a difference what week it is. I have them all the time. So,
okay.
You know, they're always at the ready. And we just want to welcome Laura Husey, right, who's here with us today to speak about grief and understanding grief. And she will introduce herself in a minute. We've got Leon, the other director that's online as well. And we are welcoming each and every one of you here today to join this. So with that, we are 360 Degrees Lifestyle Support Network. For those who don't know who we are, we educate and inspire individuals to change their lifestyle. We help with diabetes, type 2 diabetes, obesity, hypertension, stress relating to those issues, and also mental health relating to those issues, because we know they're interlinked. But we do cover other topics, and we do cover other services, and we do have connections with other professionals and practitioners that could help you with your issues. We also have a WhatsApp group, which you are welcome to join. I will put the details in the chat. And every Sunday at 12 o'clock, we are here speaking about different topics through the professionals and practitioners that come and talk about their chosen profession and their favorite topics. So without further ado, and me waffling, I will hand you over to Laura.
Okay, hi. Thank you so much, Francine, for inviting me to share your platform today, and Brother Leon as well. It is an honour and a privilege to be here amongst you all today. This presentation is called Overstanding Grief. And in this presentation, we are going to be speaking about the necessity of awareness at this time. So Francine and anybody else with tissues, my intention is not to bring the tears on. So it's kind of structured in a way that we're just talking factually. Okay, today. So I am Laura Pusey. I am a death practitioner. And we're going to be speaking, as I've said, about dying, death and grief, and looking at how a lack of cultural awareness affects the way that we grieve, and how we are going to, or how I propose to set about managing our grief from a personal, social and cultural perspective. Okay, so a little bit about me. I hope you can see my full screen. I can't. Yeah. From childhood, I'm one of those little weird ones that always had an interest in dying, death and grief. When I was little, my parents took me to the funeral of a cousin of theirs, and he was in his home and he was in his coffin in the sitting room, and the lid was off and everybody was crowded around, and I didn't know what was going on. I was about 6 or 7 at the time, And my dad said to me, Laura, you've never met Cousin Headley. So he swooped me up off my feet and held me parallel over Cousin Headley's body so that I could see him face to face and say hello. I was swiftly returned back to the floor. My father was chastised by every lady in the room. And I'd say that was my first memory of death. However, my parents had a son before I was born. He was Jonathan, and he was born with a hole in his heart. And during pioneering, a pioneering operation, he passed away. His death affected my life. I came after him, and my parents never received any counselling for their grief. And yet they were always able to speak freely about death. Oh, when I die, my dad would say, just put me in the garden. My mother was a nurse, and she worked in a hospital caring for people who had cancer. And she would come in the morning, and I'd be there at the breakfast table, and I'd say, did anybody die last night? And she would either say yes or no and explain the process. So it's something that I've kind of always been around and always been aware of. In the summer of 2015, my aunt passed away. She was diagnosed with cancer, and her cancer developed after revelations about her paternity. All her life, up until the age of 60, she'd thought her father was her father, and that wasn't the case. The truth is that my auntie Sonia probably died of a broken heart. She was unable to vocalize her trauma. She was unable to vocalize her feelings and her upset. She just couldn't, not even to her family. And when we suppress our trauma, we hold it within. I sat with her. I came down from Huddersfield, 200 miles down the M1, and I sat with her in Guy's Hospital, and I stayed with her overnight. And it was the most beautiful experience that I've ever had. I found that it was a time where there is no support given, adequate personal care and support given to a person in hospital when they are making that transition. And to be with her during that process was a gift that I can't describe to you. I've since had the privilege of being with people as they have made their death transition, and it's an honor. It's an honor. I realized after my aunt passed away that my uncle and my cousins, although they lived quite close to Lewisham, had no access to the community, and they weren't aware of people within the area who are offering the services that we need at that time. I realized that there was a huge gap there of care that was just missing, and that marked the journey, the start, the genesis, as I have written here, to my role as a deaf practitioner and defining that role. So on that journey, I've been on many courses, and I have often found myself to be the only Black person in the room. And, you know, at first I used to get frustrated at that. I used to think, you know, why are there not more of us? The reason was because most of these courses were priced out of, you know, the budget of, well, it was priced out of my budget, let's say, and it would be a course that I would have to save up for. I then thought to myself, well, maybe they were at the course before, or maybe there'll be a brother or sister in the course that follows. I then went down the route of thinking, well, if that's the case, then why have we not been able to penetrate this course and show that we exist, and add our culture and add our teachings to this teaching that I was receiving, I then realized that these courses were never designed for me, and never designed for people that look like me. There is so much information out there, so much. Even now I'm seeing, you know, we're all flooded with information. Death is like a buzzword at the moment, and this information never approaches from a cultural perspective. And so I have found that there is much work that needs to be done in this area. Okay. The result of our being invisible when it comes to dying, death, and bereavement is that our grief is ignored. Our emotional, mental, and social states are not considered. And this is shown when we experience a loss, how quickly our employees intend for us to come back to work. I remember one day when I was very young, in my first job, there was a Caucasian lady, and she came into work one afternoon. Nothing unusual, but that morning she had cremated her mother, and her mother had died less than a week before. And I couldn't stop staring at her. I just couldn't understand how she could be at work following those watercress sandwiches. Like, surely there must have been something in between. When it comes to our grief, it's something that we do, and it's something that takes time. And we find that there is a struggle of overstanding from outside with regards to our needs at that time. As a result of our trying to assimilate into a system that we don't belong in, we have suppressed our grief, and we have found that we no longer know how to grieve. It's as though we have lost our connection with death. Indeed, we have had a strong connection with death. We are the first people on earth. So we have been dying the longest. And there are times throughout his story where it is well documented that we have taken our own lives in order to escape that horror which was to await us. So coming back to our modern day, this rush to process our grief and to suppress our natural emotions so that we can care for the family, get back to work and survive, is manifesting as sickness within our bodies. We then medicate against this sickness, and we use medicines that are not designed for us either. And so we find that we are dying at a disproportionate rate, or so we are told. We've put aside our social and emotional needs and concerns to satisfy the European model of grief and mourning. And in our bid for survival, to satisfy our family and cultural needs, we are satisfying the demands of a system that's built against us. And this system only actually exists as long as we stay in place and do the work that they need us to do. But what we need to do is consider ourselves first. So you may be asking, what actually is grief? Well, this is the pain from suffering that is experienced when we lose somebody that is very important to us. We can grieve because we've lost an object. We can grieve because we've lost our career, our health. We grieve for so many different reasons. I remember once when I was younger, I used to have a dummy, a soother, a dodie, whatever you call it. I used to have a dummy, used to go everywhere with this dummy, right? And there was one day that we were out and I was in the pushchair, and for some reason the dummy flew out the buggy, pushchair, whatever. And you know, my mum refused to pick it up. That broke my heart. Grief can affect us in so many different ways at so many different times, and sometimes we just don't have the words to articulate our feelings. It affects every aspect of our lives in many different ways. We don't know when it will strike, and we don't know how long it will last for. It manifests in a range of different ways that often leave us feeling lost and exhausted. It is possible for us to grieve for somebody that we've never even known. And I just want to pause right there, because last year when our brother, George Floyd, was murdered, we grieved. It's not unusual for us to feel it in our hearts when we hear that somebody in a different town or somebody far away from us has passed away. And, you know, often when we hear of things going on in the news, we think to ourselves, I really hope it's not one of us. We feel it. We feel it in our hearts. We feel it in our souls. So it's also possible for us to grieve for somebody who died years ago, decades ago, because when we suppress our grief, it will manifest. When? We don't always know. But the levels of pain that we feel when we lose somebody that we truly love are only an indication of how deeply we have loved. And often we don't realize how deep our love actually goes, but we do feel it. So let's go deeper. It's impossible to approach death or grief in isolation of life. So many of the models that we are presented with of how you should grieve and what it should look like and how long it should take are presented to us from a Caucasian perspective, a European perspective. And they do not consider the other things that we have to consider alongside our grief. The fact that we live, the fact that we have to care for our families and maintain our structures. Often our families are not just our immediate loved ones within our household. We have extended family, and our community members also come into that as well. If we are part of a church, we often find that those members become part of our family. We have to consider our finances. Many people these days do not leave a will. And so we need to be planning for these times. Without planning, we can find ourselves overburdened with more pressures that we didn't anticipate, especially if the passing was sudden. We can find that we experience a change in status. Am I still a mother? Am I still a wife? Am I still a husband? Am I still a father? There are many different questions that come to mind when a loved one passes away. Who are we? We're often faced with this feeling of identity. Where do we fit in the world today? So we have the social there, the identity, the family dynamics, the finances, the status, all of this that's going on inside our minds. But at the same time, we're dealing with anguish, exasperation, where we're trying to find ways to get our loved one back, or to remember our loved one, or to just feel them again, or just smell them again. We're dealing with our intense sorrow at this time. And then comes a moment where we have to start to adjust to this new lifestyle that we live, because not only has our loved one made a transition, but we have too. And so we have to find out who we are, where we start from here, where do we go next? And moving forward, we can find that we are hit with the trauma of loss once again, the trauma of the anguish, the exasperation, the haggling, the sorrow, and again, adjusting. It's like a cycle, and this cycle is closed, as is in front of you now, but we will open it up. We will do so together. Okay, so of the diaspora or diaspora, however you pronounce it, the word diaspora means a population of people who are scattered from their homeland. Regardless of whatever island or country in Africa that we hail from, we are all African people. For the descendants of Africa who were enslaved, the Africans who were enslaved, the torment of ancestral abuse is carried throughout our bloodlines. There's never been any healing on a cellular level for the trauma that was experienced by our ancestors. This is carried down through our learned behaviors and also through our DNA. So when I'm talking about learned behaviors, it's those things that we've been raised. You don't chat your business. Don't let anybody know that you're suffering. Keep it to yourself. Remain poised. Yeah? Don't let them know that they've got us. Okay? We deal with it in-house. And it's all good. This was all passed down for our survival and so much more. Okay, now we can move on. But let's also consider the fact that in the UK and actually throughout the earth, we have been classed as second-class citizens. We are subjected to a well-documented history of institutional racism. Our bodies have always been deemed less important, and so they have been subjected to experimentation. The food and the medication that is provided for us is designed to keep us going for long enough to keep the system going. It's not there to heal us in any way. And we are educated away from our emotions and our natural self in a world that celebrates the stiff upper lip. So here we are. We are finding ourselves in a situation where we are so burdened down with life that when we add grief on top of that, we can often feel as if we are going crazy. There are so many times that I speak to people, actually more so Caucasian people, if I'm honest, and they have to be given permission to cry and be told it's okay to feel the way that you feel. It's okay to express yourself. It's okay to feel sad. Oftentimes I have to explain to people that if you've known your mother for 50 odd years, it would be strange if you didn't cry. It would be strange if you didn't express yourself in some way or another. As I've explained, that the healing process, the grief process can be delayed, but it does take place. Okay, so we are dying at a disproportionate rate because it has never been in the interests of the oppressor to uplift the oppressed. So we need to be looking about ourselves. Even if you have no interest in dying, death and grief and bereavement and all those things that are considered by society to be morbid, I would just encourage you to find that thing that inspires you, that excites you, that makes your heart jump and become the master of that. Own it. Yeah, because even if there are so many people out there who are doing it, the chances are that they're not doing it from a cultural perspective, that they are not addressing the needs of our brothers and sisters. And that's okay, because it's our domain, nobody else's. And nobody else has the right to set the standard as to how we do our thing. We are the original creators. There is none above us. So my company is called Dipism, and Dipism is a non-medical end-of-life and grief care business. The DIP in Dipism stands for death in practice. The ism is a way of life. An ism is a way of life. It's life. And death is part of life. Also, I was told by my father 2 months to the day before he passed away. My cousin was killed in a car accident and he was 20. The next day I went to my dad and I just said to him, Curtis has gone. And I saw the emotion, and he fixed up and he said to me, Laura, death is part of life. 2 months to the day, literally, he himself was pronounced dead. So Dipism is part of a larger organisation of funeral operatives that will be launching this year. Dipism comes under the umbrella of an organisation called FACFO, which is the Federation of African and Caribbean Funeral Operatives. This organisation is drawing people from all over the UK and indeed the world at some point to place, or basically to bring together all of the people who care for those at this time of their lives, all of the people that cater to the industry of dying, death and grief. We need to know who our funeral directors are and where they are. We need to know who our death practitioners are and where they are. I see that we've got Debbie on the Zoom. She is a funeral celebrant, as am I, based in London. I'm based in Yorkshire, but she's based in London. We need to know who the people are who are providing the services that we need when it comes to the end of our lives, and we need to be planning for that time. So through Dipism, I offer a range of services and courses pertaining to dying, death and bereavement. I am a funeral celebrant, as I've mentioned, death practitioner. I'm a hypnotherapist and a bereavement counsellor. I work with a range of spiritual tools and skills, and I also work on different levels that I'll be explaining soon. Through Dipism, I am striving to educate and empower all people to take control of their death. We are all going to die at some point, and it's not fair to leave those that we care about in conflict, with unanswered questions, with debt, fear or worry. And yet this is what's happening. So it has to stop. There are many, given the situation that my aunt was in, there are so many hidden stories that need to be told. There is so much work that needs to be done. So a death practitioner, from the moment that a person receives a terminal diagnosis, I am there, and there are people like me who are here to offer guidance and support to the person who is making their transition, and also to their family members as well. This may include respite care. It may include getting the shopping in, doing the dishes. It may include sitting with the person and just talking to them about their upcoming transition. This may be a time that your family members don't want to talk to you about the fact that you're about to make this transition. They don't have the words. And it's a two-way thing. By opening up discussions about dying, death and grief, we can start to talk about it without the fear. We can open up and we can express ourselves from the heart. How often do you hear your family members, often elders, saying, "Ah, my son dead"? this is an opportunity to speak to them about that, you know, without them being able to come back and say to you, you want me for dead, you know, or you're trying to wish me dead. No, talking about it doesn't rush it. We all have a date and a time. We don't know when that will be. But if we plan for it, then the rest of the days that we have can actually be spent living, because we don't have that stress on our shoulders, and we know that we're not passing it down to our loved ones. So as a funeral celebrant, I help to arrange funerals. I can conduct the service. And the reason for that is, again, because I've been to too many funerals that have been conducted by people that don't look like me, for people that look like me. The people that are talking at these funeral services have no concept of the person who lies before them. They have no concept of the culture, and they don't care, to be honest. How much better is it to attend a funeral of somebody and know that the person who is speaking knew them, loved them, or at least had a relationship with them, or understood, overstood the culture, the nature of our ways, and the importance of our traditions and our rituals at that time. I offer grief and bereavement counselling, and this is something that, oh my gosh, I can honestly say, hand on heart, is, sorry, I'm lost for words. It's something that I am honoured to be able to do. It's something that, I know it's going to sound a bit weird, but it gives me joy. It gives me pleasure when I can speak to somebody who is in tears, and I can turn their perspective around by the end of the conversation, so that they can see a positive, so that they can see a way forward, so that they can at least fight another day. To be able to speak to somebody who has lost somebody who's very dear to them, very close to them, is a necessity within our community, because the people who are in place to offer such guidance do so from a European perspective. I happen to also volunteer for cruise bereavement services. It's necessary, because the people who are volunteering are predominantly white, middle-class, middle-aged. And so when a brother or sister calls an organisation such as this, they're doing so because their network has broken down in some way, or they need to speak to somebody anonymously without the feeling of being judged, and to be met by somebody who is completely off the scale when it comes to cultural understanding. It's devastating, and I've witnessed it, and I don't want it to happen again to any of my brothers and sisters. So I also offer spiritual guidance. This is often a time where people find that they're looking for their loved one, they're dreaming them, or they're seeing feathers or pennies or robins. This is a time when we may think to ourselves, well, who actually am I? What am I doing with my life? Where am I going? What direction am I going in? And we're looking for our traditions. We're looking for our rituals. We are looking in our hearts for the soothing that is needed in order for us to continue. As I might have mentioned before, I'm also a hypnotherapist, and I do work with past life regression, and I work with bloodline trauma and healing and clearing of that. I recently watched a video that Iyanla Van Sant did. It was just a small clip, and she was talking to Charlemagne the God, and she said to him, are you doing healing work or are you doing growth work? These are two different things. The healing is the energy, clearing the energy of our trauma, clearing the energy of our grief. The growth work is coming out of our grief and transforming or transitioning into the new self. And it is a new self, because when you lose somebody that you love, your life is never the same again. And it's okay. It's okay. So to overstand, let me do this bit first. An overstanding of grief is to bring about the platform on which it can sit so that we can discuss it. To overstand your grief is to let it be. When we are free to express our innermost thoughts and feelings, then we're able to move on from the energies of them. When we are able to recognize where we are in our grief, as defined by ourselves, then we are able to identify our needs, as opposed to relying on others from outside to dictate to us how we should be feeling and when we should be feeling it. Yeah. To overstand death and grief is to recognize the processes that they follow and to allow them to be and to accept them in our lives so that we can heal. To overstand is to recognize that everything is temporary and it's okay. So when I'm talking about our grief and identifying the importance of it, I'm talking about the growth process that it actually affords us. It hurts. But as I've come to understand through a book, Francine, earlier on, you said that, you know, I'm a very busy person. I am. In the past 2 to 3 weeks, I've just written a book, 45,000 words, bang. And within that, thank you, within that, I've even learned so much more about our grief and how it is handled and how we are so lost at this time. We can't rely on others anymore to guide our journey. It's simply not acceptable. So when you're overstanding grief, you are working on the practical. I intend, as a deaf practitioner, to be with the person at the moment of transition. There are certain things that have to take place at that time. On a social level, again, there it says, have you ever been to a funeral directed by somebody who stuffy, middle class, middle-aged, no culture? It's not the one. It's so sad. It's a disrespect. On an emotional level, our emotional level, our emotions are our spiritual technology. Once we learn how to navigate our bodies, we are winning. We are winning. Hence the war against us. Hence the need to destroy. On a mental level, you can feel as if you're going crazy if you do not understand what grief is and how it manifests within our lives. Too many of our brothers and sisters have been incarcerated in mental institutions and in the prison system because they were never given the opportunity to speak about their grief. They lost somebody that they genuinely cared about or who genuinely cared about them. And because they weren't given that space to grieve, they've ended up on the front page of the News of the World or the Daily Mail. You know, they've ended up, you know, in the care of the police and taken to the mental institution or the penile institution. Is that pen? I don't know if I've said the right word. Please delete if I've got it wrong. But you know, this is a time when we often experience a spiritual lift, and there are questions that need to be asked, and there are, you know, just simple questions. Even, where are they? Where are they? When my father passed away, it was like, how can somebody be so alive 1 minute and gone? What does that even mean? What does it mean? Where are they? There are answers. There are answers. And in this society where we are led to believe that death is taboo and we shouldn't talk about it and we should have a stiff upper lip and be dark and black and mournful, those questions don't get answered. Indeed, we are not given the space to answer such questions because we have to keep going. We have to pay the bills. We have to go to work. We have to keep the system running. So what have I learned? I've learned that humanity in general, especially in the West, do not know how to grieve. To stand under grief, to understand grief, is to accept what we are told, is to do as we are told by the people who seek to dominate us. This loss of overstanding has resulted in the exacerbation of our illnesses and our poor mental health. Our thought processes, absolutely everything is skeweth. Living in accord with European standards, African people have been denied their natural processes of grief. So the time has come for us to start talking our business amongst ourselves. The time has come for us to start weeping and wailing in front of ourselves, you know, together, coming together. And the time has come for us to take control of our emotions and our own innate ways. We have rituals that must be observed when our loved ones pass away. We do have traditions, we do have standards, and we do have needs that need to be recognized. But we do need to work together. So I can't actually see. I can only see a few people. So you know what? I've put there, raise a hand. If you like, then you can use your icon at the bottom and put your hand up. But I'm just going to ask these questions. Raise a hand if you've never experienced the loss of a loved one, because there are people who have never experienced death, dying, or grief on that level. Raise a hand if you have no fears surrounding your own death. None at all. Okay. Okay, Sister Karen, thank you. Raise a hand if you have, oh, thank you, Miss Leisha. Thank you, Miss Leisha. If you have expressed or planned your end of life or your funeral preferences, raise a hand. If you are actively setting money aside for your death, oh, hi, Jasmine. Thank you. My mom's name was Jasmine. Raise your hand. Thank you. Sister Rachel, thank you all for being here. Perfect. Hi, Carol. Thank you so much for being here today. And raise your hand if you have considered the effect of your death and the effect that it will have on those that you love. Raise your hand. So thank you, Miss Leisha, Sister Karen, Sister Rachel, Sister Carol, and anybody else who has raised a hand. Thank you so much. The truth of the matter is that if you weren't able, flipping heck, I've done it again, excuse me. If you weren't able to raise your hand, you're not alone. You're not alone. Around 28 million adults in the UK have not made a will. 53% of people over the age of 55 do not have a will. And 87% of people under the age of 35 have not made their wishes known via a will. These statistics are quite staggering, and it's for the whole of the UK. So the question there is, are we in the UK really a nation of death deniers? So many of us think, well, it's never going to happen. I'm too young. I'm too young. You're never too young. You're never too young. And it's something that we need to be dealing with. Brother Bilal, thank you so much for raising your hand. I look forward to hearing from you all when I finish, and I won't be keeping you for that much longer, promise. So there you go, promised. Contact me if you are in need of assistance at this time. Contact me if you want more information on my services or my courses. Contact me if you are interested in becoming a death practitioner. Contact me if you offer any services related to dying, death, or grief. If you want to find out how you can become involved in Dippism, or the umbrella company that I sit under, the company that will be launched later this year, which is called FACFO, which is the Federation of African and Caribbean Funeral Operatives, then please do contact me. So my website is dippism.com. You're quite welcome to contact me through there. You can send me an email at laura@dippism.com. And you can find me in all of those other places that's on there as well. The telephone number, if you just leave a message, then I will get back to you. Okay, so are there any questions? Does anybody want to have a talk? Let's discuss. I'll turn off my screen share and I'll hand back to Sister Francine and Brother Leon, and yeah,
I've got a question. Thank you.